if you take a look at some of the most recent bids that have come out from GSA, so things like Polaris, Alliance 2 Small Business, Astro, the CIO SP4, you can see kind of the maximum point totals. These were all other scorecard RFPs, and you can see how much the relevant experience and past performance took up of the entire score. So, we expect upwards of 80% of your proposal score to be solely from the 2 volumes of past performance and relevant experience. So really important that you think through and you're very detail oriented as you're gathering your evidence and stacking your projects and figuring out which ones you want to submit to substantiate that you have past performance in these areas. Okay, so in terms of what can you do about gathering evidence now? Something to keep in mind is that because there's no narrative response to this RFP, you are relying almost entirely on documentation that you probably didn't author. So you can see from this list that there's very few things in here that you can control. The government is looking to see documents released by other government agencies to prove that you have the experience and the capabilities that you're claiming points for in your self-scoring worksheet. So the FPDS report, if you haven't gotten yourself a login to the new sam.gov system, this is a good time to do that. It's another one that's consolidated what used to be a number of different sources. So you definitely want to make sure that you can log on and see what's in the records there. And then whatever's not substantiated by your FPDS report, you're going to have to either submit additional documentation or there's going to be a project template where you can provide a short narrative, but it has to be validated by the contracting officer. So if it's not clear what the NICS code was, or if the NICS code that's in the record isn't correct, you will have an opportunity to make minor corrections to the record, but it has to be signed off on by the government official who has cognizant authority over the contract that you're talking about. So some of the other acceptable documents that we know based on the draft RFP are going to be the contract award documents, right? So the SF-33, maybe the SF-1449. These vary based on the agency and the contract vehicle that you're working with. But you want to take a look at any project that you're considering submitting and see what you have in your records and what's available and what that documentation says and what it doesn't say, so that you know how much additional homework you need to do in terms of pulling together this evidence. So other things that are going to be authorized, a statement of work from the contract, not from the solicitation that you bid on, but from the actual contract award. And then same thing for Section B or the cleanse. So again, these have to be from the award documentation, not from the solicitation documents. Sometimes people get a little bit confused there, or they saved the wrong file in their archives. So just want to make that super clear. Okay, so what does evidence, useful evidence look like? The first thing to ask after you've verified that it's an authorized source is, does it have the right contract number on it? We went through this pain pretty recently on another GSA bid for Astro. And every time we tried to pull a piece of substantiating documentation, we had to make sure that if it was a statement of work, if it was a teaming agreement, if it was the Section B, the parent contract number had to be on every single piece of evidence that we were submitting. And that sounds really obvious and it sounds like a really simple requirement, but you would be surprised how many times a revision is issued for a PWS and they forget to put the contract number, or they copy something from the previous contract and they don't update it. That happens all the time with documents because they're human generated, right? So there is a little bit of opportunity for error to be introduced. So you want to make sure that you are taking a hard look at anything you plan to use as evidence and make sure that you can correlate that piece of evidence to the primary contract that you're claiming points for. The next thing you want to make sure of is that it's actually accurate and complete and that it says what you thought it said. Make sure that the dollar value that's reflected there is what you were anticipating and that it correlates to what you're claiming points for. The nuance in all of this is that you only get points for what you can prove. So even if you knew something was just wrong on the record, or you knew that a certain task was performed, if you can't substantiate it in black and white in writing, you're not going to get points for that. So a couple other things to keep in mind. again, are you claiming something that you know or something that you can prove? When you submit your documents to the government, are they going to be able to read what you've given them and interpret it exactly the same way that you are? For a lot of these points-based RFPs, you'll have to submit the entire statement of work, and you'll highlight and use comments, because you'll be doing this in an Adobe PDF. You'll tag it with a sticky note or with a comment that says, here's the section we want you to review. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is so that the government knows that you're not taking something out of context, because sometimes in statements of work, you'll see annotated what's the responsibility of the government and what's the responsibility of the contractor. So it's not as simple as just doing a keyword search for, computer systems design within the PWS. If you're going to take credit for something, if you're going to actually get the points awarded by the government, you need to make sure that it passes the sniff test, it meets the standard of evidence, and it's something that the prime contractor did. So it can't be a responsibility of the government. It needs to be something executed by the actual offerer. And this is I have a couple examples that I just pulled from, no particular contracts. I just got on GovWin today, pulled a couple of statements of work so that you can see what I'm talking about when it comes to specificity. So here's an example. This came, again, directly from a statement of work. And so my question is, does this meet the evidence criteria if you were trying to claim points for OCONUS place of performance? So if you want to use the chat and tell me yes or no, we can make things a little bit interactive here. Okay, so Brian says no. And Brian, you're correct. If GSA was evaluating this would not be good enough to get you points awarded for OCONUS place performance. And there's a couple of reasons why. The two that I'll stick with is, number one, for OCONUS performance specifically, it says that it needs to be in sustained fashion, right? So TDY does not count. If you're traveling for temporary duty, if you're just going for a site visit, that is not enough. You need to be there. Usually the standard is 30 days. We'll see if Polaris gives us a specific timeline. So even though it lists Yokohama, Japan, and Naples, Italy, which are very clearly OCONUS, you're not going to get credit because of, number one, it's not substantiating that you're there in a sustained fashion, and number two, it says all tasks may require travel. So we know that the OCONUS presence, rather, is in a temporary fashion for this work, just based on the wording in the statement of work. So this alone would not be enough to substantiate that you performed work OCONUS. Kind of interesting. Okay, here's another example. Different statement of work. Okay, so Brian says no because the travel seems to be temporary. And yeah, I would say that you're right. So even though if we were just looking at the paragraph 9 that says place of performance, and it says, it's a little bit encouraging, right? Because it says they shall be performed in these other locations. It's not definitive enough to say that performance actually happened there, number one. And then number two, if the government looks at the paragraph immediately preceding, directly to Brian's point, these are all temporary visits. None of them exceed the 30-day mark. And by the way, if in your PWS it does, it says 60 days a year or 75 days a year, that still may not be enough because that's not saying that it's continuous. So it might be that you go out for 3-week visits 3 times a year, but that's not the same, and it wouldn't qualify in this case. So even though there's a wonderful host of OCONUS places listed here, would not get points for this alone. Okay, last example. Yeah, so this is finally a good one, right? And it couldn't be any more clear that the primary place of performance is in Okinawa. And it's one of these, if you guys are evaluating your evidence, you're going to know it when you see it, but only if you're looking with this level of scrutiny. So this is very clear cut. Clearly the primary place performance will be at, if it said may include, if it said shall be, that would be okay. but anything less than unequivocally, black and white in print that you will be performing in a sustained fashion, OCONUS, you're not going to get the points. So this would be an example of something you would love to find in your PWS, in your award PWS or your contract PWS to use as substantiating evidence. So I want you to keep this in mind as you're looking through your projects and trying to figure out, okay, does this meet the criteria or not? If you're not applying that lens, the government is not going to look and work hard to find the points for you. So any of the legwork that you can do upfront to give yourself a really honest assessment of what does and doesn't meet the criteria, it's going to save you headaches further down the road. And the reason that I want to, foot stomp so much doing preparation now is that once we have the actual RFP, just to give you some context, the Q&A document that accompanied Astro was over 100 pages. So there was a final solicitation issued, and the runtime on that was a little bit longer than 60 days. But in that 60 days, they were having to issue so many Q&A and amendments that, just keeping up with the changes and what the most recent criteria was almost became a full-time job. So if you've got a really confident sense of where you're starting from, then you're not going to feel so disrupted every time there's clarification granted. Or if, the clarification ends up disqualifying some of your resources, you're going to have done your homework and you're going to know other places to look that might still be viable options. So I cannot stress enough the importance of preparing now before our clock has started. Okay, so in that vein, things that you can do to get ready. The first thing is to confirm your eligibility. And I know that sounds so simple, but there will be bidders who submit a proposal to the government and immediately get disqualified because of something that they didn't think through or didn't go to the trouble of verifying, right? So make sure that your SAM records are up to date. Make sure that you're registered as a small business in the right NICS codes. Make sure that your teammates are registered as small businesses in the right NICS codes. Those are all things that you can do now. And then gather and evaluate your projects. What I'm recommending people do is that they gather any contract that they think might be submission eligible and run it through our checklist. We have three checklists, free checklists that are available to download on our website that will help you through these processes. And I'll talk more about those in a little bit. Do a gap analysis, right? Once you take a look at your projects and you know which NICS codes you have past performance in and which ones you don't, that's going to inform the next two decisions. So whether or not you can be a prime on this GWAC, is that the right place for you? Or do you need to go be a teammate to somebody else because you've got two really strong projects, but you're not able to cover the breadth of the different areas? Because there's six primary technology areas, and you're going to be able to propose 7 projects. And then there's 5 emerging technology areas. So, thinking through how many of those can you yourself cover and where do you need your teammates to come in? And does it make sense for you to be the prime and to have the burden of the program management responsibility post-award? Or do you want to provide manpower and support and talent to another prime? Both may be great options depending on the situation that you're in. And then, actually everything that we've just been talking about, right? Start gathering and reviewing your records. See what's in black and white. See what you're missing. See what you're going to have to get signed off on from the contracting officer because something got missed in the documentation exchange. Take a look at your teaming agreements that you have on other contracts. Do you have the right entity listed? Do you have the right nature of the teammate listed? Does their teaming agreement say what that teammate was doing? Does it tie to the parent contract? All these things are the little details that are going to get people's evidence thrown out early. So again, the point, this Navy background, right? The proper prior planning prevents your poor Polaris performance. If you take nothing else away from this presentation today, I want you to remember that now is the time when you can get ahead on your homework. So any questions on that? It's not very exciting, but it is really important to understand that nuance. And if you guys can do that and kind of, like I said, get prepared now, if you know what kind of lens the government's going to be grading you with, you're going to have an advantage over all the other offers who are going to think that, those first 2 examples of OCONUS performance were good enough. They're not going to be. Okay, so I talked about these. Again, I'm not trying to be salesy. We're really trying to help people prepare as much as they can. That's why we've developed these completely free eligibility checklists and project evaluation forms. There's a couple out there circulating on the internet that are in Excel format that are extracted from the draft RFP. But if you look in the points columns, they all say TBD. So these are going to help you run through your projects in a little bit more of a user-friendly way. They are a PDF version. But they're going to walk you through each of the criteria. Anything in red means that you need to look hard at that and possibly reach out for help. So because it might be a disqualifying factor, or it might be something that you need to go get more evidence of or get clarified before you proceed. Because what we have found is that, we want you to think through the entire bid decision and post-award life of this contract. So just because you can bid, does that mean that it's a good decision for your company to bid? Being eligible is great. That's a wonderful thing. But if you're not able to sustain work on the contract, if you're not able to drive government or customers to use you through this vehicle, then you're not going to be able to meet the minimum criteria, the minimum contracting thresholds, basically, and you're going to get off-ramped. And then you go in timeout for a while. It's a bad place to be. You don't want the GSA contracting officers to get to know your company because you're on the naughty list, right? So you're actually going to have to perform if you are granted an award. The IDIQ is just the first step. So anyway, I say all that because what we want you to do is, if you don't have any business bidding on this contract, we want you to get to that decision early so that you can go pursue other bids that are going to help your business development goals. So like I said, these kind of go category by category. This is taken directly from the draft RFP. If we get an updated draft RFP, we will update these checklists. But we have highlighted very clearly in red any place where you need to maybe call a timeout and take a look at your documentation, or reach out to us if you need help. So we're happy to help you run through these. We do have a prepackaged offer that will basically take your projects that you give us, we'll run them all through the checklist. You'll get a report at the end that says, hey, here's how we assess each project. Here's where we think your gaps are. And based on this information, we can give you a bid, no bid decision, at least in the preliminary sense, that you can kind of think on and chew on and at least know where your gaps and vulnerabilities are. So again, we have these for the relevant experience in the primary section. We have them for relevant experience in the emerging technology section. And then we have just the overall basic Polaris eligibility checklist for you. And these are just zoomed in things. So I kind of mentioned this earlier. As you're thinking through, what you should be doing now, you basically have four choices. One is you don't bid on Polaris. The second is you bid, and you bid alone because you just happen to be one of those unicorn small businesses that can fill experience for every primary technology area and every emerging technology area. If that's you, congratulations. Most bidders are not going to be in that position. So the next two options are going to be things that you might consider if you don't have past performance in every single area. You may build a team, or you may be part of a team. A question that we get a lot is, well, how many of the areas do we have to cover to qualify for Polaris? And that's really a loaded question, because I think it might vary from pool to pool, and there is no minimum. So the way that a points-based or a scorecard RFP works is that the government will take, if there's 100 bidders, they're going to take the top 40 scores, and those are going to be the people who get contract awards. So it really matters what everybody else in your peer group can submit and what kind of scores they're getting. So it's like getting graded on the curve, right? So for that reason, we're encouraging people to try and cover every single performance area and have coverage across all of the emerging technology projects as well, because it's not going to be like, you don't have to have coverage in every single area to qualify. They've been very clear that that's not going to be what the criteria is. So this is not the Seaport Next Gen model where if you have past performance and you can check everything, you're automatically led onto the contract. That's not what this is. This is going to be, if you are in the top scorers amongst all the bidders, then you get the award. So obviously, the more areas you can cover, the more points you can accumulate, the better your score is, the higher your chances of winning. So that's why we're really foot stomping the options of building a team or being a part of a team, just because we recognize that a lot of small businesses, especially hub zone businesses and women-owned small businesses, may not have the experience portfolio to propose successfully in every area. So the good news is that we can help you with all four of these decisions. If you do need help, some people have it all under control, and this is going to be their primary primary effort for the next 6 months. If that's you, that's awesome. But if you find yourself feeling a little bit overwhelmed, if you need a little bit of extra help, and honestly, if you just want to ask some questions, give us a call. We're happy to talk through things. I've done one-on-one sessions with companies just to kind of let them talk through what their concerns are. All of our knowledge is informed by the draft RFP. And then we can give you our opinion on things based on our industry experience working with GSA and pursuing bids like this, and watching other companies pursue bids like this and the lessons that they've learned. So we're happy to have a conversation and see where it goes if you need help. Okay, so again, I mentioned, you can outsource this bid decision, especially if you're really busy now, or if you want an unbiased look, just to help you decide early so that you know if Polaris is going to be something that you should put any resources towards. Because just because you're eligible doesn't mean that it's a good decision to pursue. Sometimes we have to pull ourselves back. We're achievers, right? We want to win everything we can, but in some cases that can be more of a burden. So we just really want to encourage companies to think through: is this an investment you want to make? And are you prepared to continue investing in this direction if you are awarded? So our bid decision package, like I said, we run you through each of the checklists, we evaluate your projects, we give you a summary report at the end that says, here's where you're strong, here's where you need a second look, and here's where we think your vulnerabilities are. Happy to run you through that. Less than 2K, gets done really quickly. Really, it's contingent on how quickly you can get us the information in terms of how fast we turn it around. So happy to support you in that endeavor. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I am not Nelson. I am Rebecca Wayland. I know I'm using his WebEx today, but our contact information is all over our website. So please do reach out if you have any questions, and I'm happy to stay on the line for a little bit longer. If anybody has kind of the one-off questions or specific questions to your situation that you want to talk through now. So I'll open the floor to any questions or any feedback that you have. We're always looking to kind of keep these engaging, and sometimes there's not a lot of new material, like I said, from the government because they haven't given us an update. But if there's anything that you'd like to see in future webinars, we're happy to take that feedback and get you guys some deep dives or deep looks into areas that are of interest to you. So thanks very much.